Today, Mr. Baldhead here, new bald hair, Mr. Monk. Oh, look better like that. Don't have to hide my big bald patch. Anyway, today I've been thinking about the age of consent. Oh, careful there. Not right now, but in the age of LEV, longevity escape velocity, i.e., humans live in 1,000, 2,000 years biologically. By that point, if you've lived 1,000 years, you'll probably have digital immortality. But whatever, yeah, forget it. Okay. So right now, if I were to go to the US and sleep with a 16-year-old, I would be beaten, mobbed, and called a paedophile. If I were to go back to my own home country and do that, it would be perfectly legal, and people would say I was a pedo and a bit of a dickhead, but no one would really care, and there's not much anyone could do about it. Then if we went to Germany, whoa, even crazier, 14 is the age of consent, right? Now, I'll put my opinion out on this, and it's probably not going to be that popular, but I'll put it out. I think, 14, 15, 16-year-olds can be physically attractive, biologically, I would say they are so, and any man or woman's, ideas that that's not true, probably going to be shown as bullshit if you actually measure their arousal when looking at these people. I think could be wrong about that. Anyways, if we have a longevity escape velocity, i.e., we're able to live essentially indefinitely and look, like we were when we were 16, more or less, or 18, whatever the fuck it'd be, yeah? The whole appearance-based thing, like, oh, they look too young for you, that's kind of gone. Yeah, like, for example, if I were to walk around Vietnam and look at a bunch of women, sometimes I can just look and think, oh, that's definitely too young, and I just know. But that's gonna completely evaporate over time. And to be fair, there are 20-year-olds, especially in Asia, that I look at and I'm like, oh, it's a 12-year-old girl. I talk to them and they've got a full uni life. I'm like, what the fuck? So it's going to be very hard. On the looks basis, maybe we'll have information and databases to tell us to actually know how old people are. A 16-year-old or someone looking 16 could be 16. It could be 89, etc., etc. So enforcing the age of consent at the lower end is going to be difficult because it's going to be hard to measure anyway. So I think there's going to be a few problems with that. There's going to be problems with infidelity, but that's not really what I'm talking about today. Really, what I want to talk about is not the lower age metric, because I say, it's an unpopular opinion. They can look attractive, but for me, if I was to speak to a 13-year-old girl for more than 20 minutes, not even, more than like 7 minutes, I wouldn't want to sleep with that girl, not because she's not necessarily attractive, as awful as that sounds, but simply because mentally she's a child. I can tell that there's a big difference between us mentally, that essentially she doesn't know anything about life. I can pretty much convince her of anything, tell her anything, and that's a problem, really. That to me is not attractive. I don't want to date a child, a mental child either. And to be honest, I think 18, very, very drunk or very, very intoxicated is probably my limit, even though in the UK, my home country, it's 16. I just don't think I could do it, even with an 18-year-old. It'd have to be an extremely specific circumstance and quite a lot of intoxication. It's not going to happen when I'm sober. 21, now we're looking at someone sort of 21-ish, 21 and above, I think, can pretty much give reasonable consent to someone my age. 24, 25, there's no problem. Yeah, there's no problem. So from my perspective, what it comes to in terms of what should be permitted and what should be done in terms of dating is not necessarily physical appearance. It's the mental age, it's the power dynamics and that kind of thing. I don't want to date a child, and I think the majority of people probably don't either. Yeah, people want to date people who are younger than them, but I don't think it's to do with like the mental aspects. I think that's to do with being physically attractive. You know, obviously, I probably wouldn't date a 75-year-old right now because she'd not be very attractive. But if tomorrow she reverted back to a 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old version of herself, she might be a lot more fun than anyone else out there. But would that be abusive on her end? Probably not. 34. I'm probably old enough to deal with that. But what if she was 400? If she was 400 years old, she'd have more than 10 times the life experience that I do. And I actually think it would be quite reasonable to label her trying to get into a relationship with me as abuse and being abusive, right? So I'm wondering if, 1,000 years into the future or whatever, if the argument, well, she told me she was 55, is actually going to be a legitimate argument, line of reasoning and argumentation in a court of law, because you're 7,000 years old, or whatever, 850 years old, and this person you're dating is 50 years old. I would say there is a massive power imbalance. If the physical dynamics are still the same, yeah, I would say there's probably going to be a tremendous power imbalance there. So I'm wondering what happens to the age of consent there. As well, if we're, on different planets, able to be on different planets and stuff, what happens there? Because the rules of Mars, the rules of Jupiter, rules of Saturn aren't going to be the rules of Earth. So I wonder how it will vary from place to place. I think it will be younger. I think it will be less strict because there'll be lower populations. So there'll be less sort of opportunity to breed. Though I think a lot of breeding will be done in artificial wombs. But that's a whole other subject. So the age of consent thing is going to be really different, in my opinion. Yeah, and I think there are other considerations as well. Like, is there an age that's old enough? Is it done by a percentage of life experience? It's going to be a real crazy thing. Because to me, personally, I think at 18, an individual can more or less make a choice in regards to that. And then individuals my age or older, it's up to them to make a moral choice on that. But I also, see that there are people my age and older who are not emotionally mature, mentally mature enough to make the right decisions. So having a hard number, a line in the sand that's the law, kind of allows like the minimal abuse. Theoretically, that's up for debate, but that's the general idea, and I agree with that in principle. So would we have a cut-off age? Would we say, you've reached 50 years of age, anyone above 50 can date someone who's 500,000 years old if they please? What about simulations? Yeah, so in a simulation, this will probably happen. Now, I'm thinking there's going to be a wonderful future where technology is vastly expansive. We're going to have FDVR, which is full dive virtual reality, yeah, where you essentially live in another world, completely replicated to fit your senses and physics and everything, right? Now, if I were to abuse a 6-year-old child here in the real world, I should go to jail for it. I would hope that people would send me to jail, and that when I was in jail, I'd get the fuck beaten out of me daily. That's what I would hope, because what I've done is, quite a nasty act, completely skirted consent, and I've probably left a scar on a young, poor soul for the rest of their life, potentially, right? So I should be punished for that in real life, because there's a real consequence. What if I did it in a video game? If I did it in a video game now, simulated, in a lot of countries that probably wouldn't be illegal. So it would be, because pornographic depictions of minors are illegal in a lot of countries. But if it's a thought in my head, that's not illegal. If it's a game where, I don't know, I don't really want to get into that, that's a bit gross, but let's say there's not a proper visual representation. That's technically legal already, because there's no victim, right? There's no victim. But here's the thing, let's say we have FDVR. So we've got full immersive virtual reality. If you, or somebody, or whoever, not you, not me, somebody, some immoral character out of the way, created one of these worlds to, torture and rape virtual 7-year-olds or 8-year-olds. Oh, I don't like this, it's grim, but we're going to get into it. Is that immoral? Should it be illegal? Right? Because to me, there's two arguments here. One is we've basically ascended all ideas about egos and privacy, so people should be allowed infinite expression, right? So even if we think it's immoral, it doesn't matter. Okay? So that's one. This is just morality, not law, just morality. So that's one argument in terms of morality. Another is that because it's essentially the same as baseline reality, even if you're sort of aware it's not the real world, does it hardwire you to actually seek that and do that in the real world? Because this isn't like it's not like a video game where you're detached from the character that you're playing and you're going through concepts that a character can do and hypotheticals. Because this type of virtual reality would be exactly the same as this reality from your perception. It's not really any different perceptually from abusing someone in the real world. But there's no victim. There's no real victim because it's not a real thing. So I am wondering what the morality is going to be around that, what the laws are going to be around that. Personally, I actually don't know what the answer should be, because we should let people, on principle, everybody explore everything they want internally to an infinite degree, right? And it's quite easy to say, well, we shouldn't have this, we shouldn't have that. There's too many shouldn't haves, right? So there's an argument that, fuck, there shouldn't be any shouldn't haves. Let's see what happens. To me, I just kind of don't want that. From a disgust perspective, not even from a moral perspective, I just don't really want that idea that people can do that kind of simulated thing. And I also feel like it trains you and allows you to experience it in a real way, in such a real way, that it might make you carry out those those kind of offences in real life. Not in the way that people say video games make you violent, because it's a kind of detached experience and observation, a video game, but being in base, it's the same as doing it in the real world, yeah, perceptually. So, yeah, it's a fucking weird one, and I don't know the answer. But yeah, I just thought in an age of LEV and FDVR, what's going to happen to age of consent laws? Is there going to be a court case where the defendant says, oh, I thought she was 50, she told me she was 50, turns out she's only 49, and then he goes to jail? It's going to be a weird one. Anyways, if there's anyone there, let me know. If not, I'll recap this later. It's kind of cool thinking about this stuff, because I know in the future probably no one will ever see this, but I'll look at it and think, wow, these are pertinent issues that are emerging, and I was way ahead of it. I probably won't. I'll probably be stuck in FDVR, not even really thinking about stuff I did 5,000 simulated years ago. Anyways, that's the thing. I didn't want to talk about that one. I didn't want to talk about certain aspects of it, but I feel like I should, because it's probably going to cause issues in the future.